Welcome into the Inside Indiana podcast. This is Ken Bikoff along with Ed Magoni and Zach Osterman. And guys, Big Ten Media Day was kind of the introduction of Kevin Wilson to the national media as head coach of Indiana. Now, football camp doesn't start here for another week, but I just wanted to jump right in with you guys and talk to you about the impression that Kevin Wilson made, because he's a guy that went on stage, had a little bit of swagger to him, even though he's never been a head coach in a college football game before. He certainly looked the part. And Ed, I'm going to start with you. What was your takeaway on just the impression that he left in Chicago?
Well, I think you made a good point there, Ken. This being his first time as a head coach at a conference media day, I thought he did a great job myself. I just think he put a bug in people's ear about the Hoosiers and let them know that he thinks his team can be good. And I think that surprised a lot of people. A lot of coaches won't come in and say that they believe that the team that they're inheriting could be good. And he didn't. Still has, playing close to the vest with the quarterback situation. But, for all intents and purposes, I thought he handled it really well. He answered all the questions, as he always does. I mean, he's always been a direct guy. If you ask him a question, usually he answers it, as best he can at the time. And, frankly, I don't think the quarterback situation is settled. I mean, he's just shooting the truth there. But compared to a lot of the head coaches, I thought who have had previous experience, I think he did a very nice job, and certainly doesn't look to be strange in front of a microphone. So I thought it was handled very well.
Zach, correct me if I'm wrong here, because like Ed, and I said he passed a look test. He certainly didn't seem like a guy who's just happy to have a head coaching job. He's somebody who has a clear plan and is somebody who is expecting to win this year.
Yeah, I mean, he really carried. It seemed like he really sort of carried that message forward, that sort of drumbeat that he's been putting out since he got the job of. We expect to win now, and we are going to, we're not going to spare any expense in terms of how hard we work and things like that. And we're not going to waste any time with people who can't keep up. All that sort of stuff. I mean, it's one thing to say that when you get a job in December, and then you say it in the spring. But I mean, to really keep carrying it forward. And I think the thing that really helped was Gunnar Kiel and the timing of that commitment, and that being sort of the perfect momentum swing into media day. It was the first question he was asked. It was actually the Chicago Tribune that asked the question. He obviously couldn't talk about him by name, but I mean, just talking about more generally the idea of getting momentum from the recruiting side of things. I think that was a really big help. And I've talked to a couple of other people in the 24/7 network who told me that they thought that Wilson was one of the most affable guys on stage. Particularly for a first-year head coach, particularly for someone who'd never done, the media day swing, he seemed really at home. He seemed really comfortable. And you don't always see that in a first-year guy.
Now, the fact that he is a first-year coach, and the problems that have gone on at Ohio State, they've obviously lose Jim Tressel, who resigned or got fired, whatever you want to consider what happened with him. There's also a new head coach at Minnesota and Jerry Kill. There's a new head coach at Michigan and Brady Hoke. Zach, does that give Indiana a chance to take a step up this year because of the fact that they're kind of on the same footing as some of these other programs in terms of leadership at the top?
I think it does to an extent. I mean, I think it. I think you have to put it into sort of, it has to manifest itself physically. Though I think so far it has, the recruiting success and things like that. I mean, it's one thing to say, it's a new day in the Big Ten. You have all these new coaches and all this turnover, especially some of the blue bloods. You mentioned Michigan and Ohio State. But it's another thing to really capitalize on that and really capitalize on the momentum that you build when you do get a new head coach. Because I think a lot of times you kind of see that, a new head coach is going to generate some excitement, some intrigue, and is probably going to be able to translate that into some success. But, when you see them having the success that they're having on the recruiting trail, when you see what other people are saying about the program and what other people are saying about, the coaching staff, that's physical, tangible momentum. And I think that's more important even than just sort of talking at large about, well, we have this chance because of these different things at other schools. I think building momentum at your own school is maybe the biggest weapon, the biggest thing, the biggest step they've taken so far.
And how important is a change in attitude at the top for Indiana in particular? Because, not a knock on Coach Lynch, but he had a different style. It was kind of a thing of, we're going to do the best that we can to win, and when we get, we're going to try to make plays and do what we can. With Wilson, it just seems like it's more of a thing of, this is what we're going to do, not try to do it. This is what we're going to do. Talk about the difference in attitude a little bit between maybe that you've seen from Coach Wilson and what you saw from Coach Lynch.
Well, I think there's a sense of urgency on the team right now. I think that's the biggest difference I've seen. Everyone stayed this summer to work out in the weight room and get stronger and faster. And DeMarlo Belcher maybe said it best. He said, Coach Wilson will embarrass you and then build you back up if you aren't performing at his level. And I don't know that was always imposed under Bill Lynch. Where he would just flat out tell it like it was, to the media or to the players in front of other players. I think, for most intents and purposes, Coach Lynch would always say, if they lost a game, they played a good football team. I don't think Kevin Wilson's going to give you answers like that. I think he's going to say, well, this guy blew this, and this guy needs to be held accountable for that. I mean, it's just like in the spring, he brought up the tight ends and said they were grading out in the 40s and 50s. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard Coach Lynch say that a player is performing grading out at a 40 or 50 level when
Right.
he should be grading out at an 80 level. And I just think that adds a sense of urgency and a sense of accountability to the team that wasn't necessarily there before. And guys don't want to be embarrassed in front of their peers, and they don't want to be embarrassed in front of the media or have their name written in the paper, under poor circumstances. I think it's all part of the motivation to get this team up to a bowl par level.
Zach, do you think that the fact? Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is I think that and I'll admit to not having been as close to the Bill Lynch era as you guys were, but I think that there's a sense of recognition from the players now of it's not just bringing in a new head coach. It's the staff is inarguably upgraded in terms of credentials and resumes from what some recent previous staffs have been. Not even just Bill Lynch's staff, but going back a few years. I mean, just in terms of getting guys from Nebraska, getting guys from Oklahoma, getting guys from Michigan, getting guys from, I'm not sure if they actually got anybody from Oklahoma, I apologize, but I mean, Nebraska, Michigan, being able to lure Kevin Johns away from Northwestern, a program that, it's not a world beater, but goes to bowl games every single year. It seems like there's a greater recognition from players of, not just, I don't want to be embarrassed. I think they can see it when these guys talk about it, because they know that all of these coaches have been where, I think generally you'd want to take a program like Indiana to, if nothing else, an 8-9 win a year program. And I think there is a recognition there that maybe wasn't before of what it takes, and if nothing else, of the standard that they have to reach. Whether they can reach it or not is something to be seen, but the sort of bar has been set, and I think they maybe see it a little bit more. I'm not sure if I'm making my point exactly the way I want to, but
No, that's actually what I was going to go to with you. I was talking to a couple of Hoosier fans earlier this week who said that one thing that they think is different with what Kevin Wilson is doing right now is, from the fan base, they don't feel that there's always been that pressure on the team to perform, because there isn't that tradition of winning. If a team starts to struggle a little bit, a lot of IU fans will say, "Oh, okay, well, I've seen this game before." But the coaches, that's not the way that they're approaching things. And again, it's not as if Coach Lynch wanted to lose or any of the staff was looking to lose. It seems that the expectations from the current group is a little bit higher. I mean, does that kind of play into it a little bit, Zach?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think anytime you get, I think anytime you get a new staff, you're going to talk about expectations, and certainly there's a lot of things that you'll hear a new coaching staff talk about that they have to talk about, things that they, that they really have to kind of echo. But again, I think the difference is that this coaching staff, and again, I'm not trying to tear down old staffs, but I think the difference is that this coaching staff has a certain level of credentials that that can back up its talk. It can, the guys from Nebraska can talk about competing for Big 12 titles. The guy, Doug Mallory can talk about what it's like to coach kids who go on to be first-round draft picks in the NFL every single year. There is a difference there, and I think that it's not just us who recognize it. I certainly think that the kids recognize it, and I think that's maybe where you get the difference in expectations is, suddenly saying there's a reason why we should be sort of raising our expectations right now, and it's because we have faith that these people that we're working with know what they're doing and are going to have us better prepared.
Now, Zach, of course, we go from the gridiron to the hardwood. You were up in Fort Wayne at this past weekend's AAU tournament. You've been to a number of them this year. What really stood out from this past weekend's trip up to the northern part of the state?
Well, it wasn't a huge field. It's the end of the period. You could tell a lot of tired bodies, both on the court and in the audience. It's just, after a while, you've been through enough gyms and seen enough places, and I thought Demetrius Jackson really closed out his summer well. I think I think a lot of young point guards I've seen this year, and this is probably not an uncommon sort of need, but a lot of young point guards I've seen this year have sort of needed to find the balance between when to look for their own shot and when to set up their teammates, when to distribute to their teammates. I think that was something that, Jackson is a talented offensive guard as well as a talented point guard. I think it was something he was still kind of learning. When should I take my own shot? When should I, really focus on involving my teammates or setting up my teammates? I think that's something I saw a lot of improvement from him at Fort Wayne. I continue to see improved ball handling from Gary Harris. I think that's going to be a key element of his game wherever he goes. I think if he does end up at IU, I wouldn't be surprised to see him handle the ball a lot behind Jordan Holes and Yogi Ferrell. But beyond that, there weren't too many things that stood out. Jaquan Lyle, Trey Lyles played well. They were playing up two full age groups with Spieth into Heat 17s, which was kind of gutted at the end of the evaluation period by some defections and some guys moving away. But Lyles was at times, it seemed like, even directing AJ Hammons through different plays. It's clear that he feels comfortable in that system now, and it looks like with a couple of his teammates having nice summers as well, that it could be I wrote about this a little bit today, but it could be a pretty good year for him at Arsenal Tech High School up in Indianapolis.
Well, Ed, like we said earlier, the IU football camp kicks off next week. Early on in the camp, what are you looking for to hear from the coaches that's going to be encouraging for you?
Well, I'm anxious to see what the offensive line can do, to be honest. I think Coach Wilson's background with the offensive line, him being a former offensive lineman himself, and I've always been big on the offensive line. I think it's the most important position on the field, to be honest with you. And I think if you have a good offensive line, they make their quarterbacks and running backs look sensational, and then the quarterback can make the wide receivers look good. But it all starts up front with the offensive line, and I think if that area can really improve for Indiana, I think that the Hoosiers have a real chance to win some Big Ten games this season. And if it doesn't materialize, then they're going to struggle all season, regardless of who's under center or who's behind, running the ball. I just think the offensive line is the key to the whole thing, and that's what I'm anxious to see.
Zach, kind of the same question to you, except for I'm asking, what do you think is going to be what do you want to see that's going to encourage you, and what are you really concerned about with the Hoosiers going into camp?
Well, I think Ed makes a really good point, simply because there are a lot of question marks across the defensive front. Indiana has a lot of talent at wide receiver, but that's one of the positions on the field that's kind of reliant upon, talent and success at other positions to really affect the game sometimes. And I think, Indiana really needs strong offensive line play because you don't know if Darius Willis is going to, he's had injury problems in the past. And you don't know what the quarterback situation is going to look like, come Labor Day weekend. The other thing I'm looking for, I know a lot of Indiana fans have talked about, through the Gunnar Keel commitment and things like that. Well, Indiana still needs defensive players, and certainly they do. I don't expect, world beaters. I don't think anybody should expect world beaters from Indiana's defense this year. I would be concerned to know where the playmakers are going to come from. You do at least need guys on the defensive side of the ball that can step up and make plays. You think about what Jeff Thomas did at the end of the Purdue game last year. You need guys like that, if nothing else. Everyone's raved about Jeff Thomas's ability to sort of quarterback the defense this summer. I think that's going to be really important. We've heard some things about Lawrence Barnett from the spring and things like that. Certainly, there's some guys along the defensive line, excuse me, that could be, could sort of step up this year. One way or the other, I think that Indiana really needs some defensive playmakers to emerge at some point this season, early this season. And that's the thing I think I would be concerned about. That's the thing I'd look for in camp is who can, even if they're not, like I said, even if as a unit they still struggle, who can get to the ball, who flies around and makes a lot of tackles. I think Indiana needs to iron some of those details out early if it wants to put together a defense that can, I think Kevin Wilson said at Media Day, when was the last time Indiana won a 10-7 ball game? If they want to win some low-scoring games as well as some high-scoring ones, which they haven't had as much problem with winning in the past, that's what they're going to need to iron out in fall camp.
Well, I think that's going to be the most intriguing part of it is you have some talented players who've been with the program, who've been redshirting with the program, who've come into Bloomington in the past couple of years. But it'll be interesting to see how the new assistant coaches, especially, work to extract more out of those players than we've seen in the past. And I think that to me is going to be one of the big storylines, obviously, along with development at running back, the offensive line, quarterback questions, all of that. I think that just the defensive side of the ball, to me, that's kind of the X factor here. With the entire football camp, which we're going to have full coverage of that when it opens up next week. Zach, last question to you. Former LSU center Garrett Green is supposed to decide late this week about what his plans are for this coming season. What's your gut on where he's going to end up?
I would still be split between San Diego State and Indiana. It seemed like his San Diego State visit went well. But I think he also still told Sean that he's worried about his education, and I think Indiana's, from what we can gather of what he's interested in studying, that sort of sport management and those sorts of things, I think Indiana is still really an option. I said this before. I think what it's going to come down to is just what's most important to him. And also it seemed like Indiana, sort of the idea of Indiana basketball made a big impact on him. I noticed sort of some of his quotes coming out of his San Diego State visit were talking about how at Indiana it was all basketball and everyone knew who I was and all this. That seems like a positive, but if you're only going to have 1 year on campus and you're going to be working toward a master's and you only get 1 year of basketball, I would imagine that that's probably something that he needs to decide whether or not he's going to be comfortable with, because he doesn't get 4 years to sort of come up in the system. He doesn't get time to acclimate to the campus in summer school or anything like that. People are going to know who he is immediately. He's a 6'11" kid who's gotten a lot of publicity here in the summer. So he needs to decide whether or not he's comfortable, sort of being in that limelight. And I don't think there'd be anything wrong with him not being comfortable with that. Just, some people just aren't. But I think it really is kind of going to come down to just at the end of the day, and I know this is kind of a cop-out answer, but what is most important to him, which is more appealing to him. He's seen two sort of starkly different pitches in terms of, what the programs anyway would offer him, which offers more that really sort of turns him on. I think that's where he's going to go. I think it's going to come down to IU and San Diego State.
Well, guys, whatever Garrett Green decides, it's a guarantee that the next couple of weeks are going to be very, very interesting on the IU football on the IU campus. You have the momentum building towards preseason workouts with the basketball team, preseason conditioning, things like that. Of course, fall camp is coming up, and guys, I'll tell you right now, if you're listening to this podcast, you're obviously an IU football fan, and you better batten down the hatches and get ready for some of the best coverage that you're going to find anywhere on the web, in newspapers, on television, anywhere. If you come to Inside Indiana, check back here with us each day where you're going to have more coverage than you could possibly imagine, and we'll get you as close to Inside Indiana as you could possibly get without a scholarship. That's all the time that we have for now. For Ed Magoni and Zach Osterman, this is Ken Bikoff. Thanks for listening, and pace yourselves.